fewer than 0.4% of businesses ever hit 10 million a year in sales. That means that almost everyone that's running profitable at 6 to 7 figures with their e-commerce brand never actually makes it to 8 figures. But after this video, that doesn't have to be you. You see, I've spent the past 15 years helping companies scale, first through our growth agency GrowthHit, and most recently, we acquired our own Shopify brand that we've been able to 10x. And in that time, the number one reason I see e-commerce brands stall out and plateau is that they try and scale linearly. And when I say linearly, this is what I mean by that. You're just trying to do more ads. You're trying to throw on more products. You're trying to squeeze more hours out of the day. And just doing more, working harder won't make your revenue go up. Because when you do that, you hit a ceiling, you hit a plateau, margins start to compress, acquisition costs goes up because you've saturated that one thing you know how to do. And suddenly nothing works the way it used to. This is what I call the valley of death. It tends to hit the hardest around the $3 million mark. And trust me, I know this feeling very well. So I decided to record a video today where I'm gonna walk you through the entire 7-part system I call the leverage point pyramid that gives you the exact process I used, and I've used it to help dozens of brands hit over 8 figures. And you do it by applying this. Scaling to 10 million a year becomes extremely doable when you uncover those leverage points and you stack them on top of each other. It's not about working harder, it's about focusing on those high impact tasks that can change the trajectory of your business. Now, let me warn you, this will be hopefully the most valuable, but also the longest YouTube video I've ever made. So without further ado, let's get into it. And by the way, if at any point you'd like us to just implement all of this for you, I'll leave a link in the description for that. Now, if we are going to be on the journey to build a 8-figure brand and hit over 10 million and beyond, it starts with this foundational layer. That means, are you in the right market and do you have the right product to service it? So let's start with this idea of choosing the right market. What does that even mean? Another way I like to frame it, 7-figure founders simply ask this question: how do I grow in this market? Just assuming the market they're in is the one they have to be in. 8-figure founders ask a different question. Is this the right market where growth is inevitable? In other words, do you naturally have tailwinds where there's going to be lots of winners in a category? Or do you have headwinds where you're constantly having to fight uphill and it's really hard to not only just get growth, but to get customers in general, especially if it's a shrinking market? The thing you might be asking yourself, did I choose the right market, right? Growth doesn't start with the right tactics, the right ad creative. It starts with choosing the right terrain. You choose the right market and oh my goodness, growth gets so much easier. But if you choose the wrong market, it doesn't matter how good of a marketer you are, the market will win. And so as you're evaluating if you have the right market, I want to look at these 4 different categories to help you assess. The first one is TAM fit, total addressable market. Are you in a market that is big and growing where you can take market share? The second question, within that market, look at your buyer type. Do you have buyers that have their wallets open, are actively looking for the solution you have, and are proactive? Or is it a market with buyers that are reactive? They don't even want to buy and they're reactive, not proactive in making this purchase. The third thing to look at is timing. As you're entering a market, are you too early? Are you too late? Or is it right on time as you're catching it at this inflection point, right? So you want to ride a wave at the right time where you can be a category leader. And then finally, this one's big. If you check off all 3 of these, the next one is competitive leverage. Do you have an unfair advantage where you can come in and you can be not necessarily better, but different from competitors and really stand out? One example of this is native deodorant. They came out at a time when there was awareness of what is actually in my products, what's in my deodorant. Does it have aluminum or is it aluminum free? And so they came to market with a product that really was right at the right time. So it was growing as people were becoming more informed. This buyer type is amazing because it's very informed females that are proactively looking for a solution. They were going to Etsy. The timing was perfect and they had a competitive unfair advantage because they had a great brand and one of the first products that was aluminum free for deodorant, which is why they're able to scale to 9 figures. So you might be asking yourself like, okay, I did this crap. I don't check all these 4 boxes. That's okay. You can make optimizations to ensure you're in the right market. So the other way to think about it, within this market pillar, what are the leverage points where you can make some shifts So this gives you the tailwinds and not the headwinds. So first, we've seen this before. Sometimes people will shift from B2C to B2B, go to corporate gifting, where the average order value goes up significantly, right? Another example of this is you might be too mass market with who you're serving. For example, we sell shorts or we sell t-shirts. Can you niche down? Candidly, the farther you niche down, usually the bigger the opportunity. So for example, instead of just being about shorts, we're shorts for the CrossFit community, really starting there and then building it from that foundation. Also, if you find yourself in a saturated market, how can you reposition it to ride a trend that's only going to get bigger? Example, you could be a beauty brand and there's lots of competitors, but as beef tallow is launching and awareness around that, you reposition to be an organic beef tallow skincare brand to really ride that wave. One of my favorite examples of a company that has done this has been Rora. And you can really see if you have a good market with this idea of Google Trends and being a one chart company. So with Rora, they help do reverse osmosis systems for your home. How do they know they chose the right market? Well, if you look at Google Trends and you type in water filtration, look at the volume. It was flat, and then as awareness comes up around PFAS or chemicals or microplastics in your water, people really start to care. All of a sudden they start taking off and it's top of mind for everybody. As awareness comes to this category, they're able to come in and be one of the dominant players. So these guys made a premium product of a water filtration system at around $400. You then have to subscribe to get filters every 1 to 2 months. They've grown to 8 figures in under 24 months, simply by choosing the right market to play in. So ask yourself, are you in the market, or are you in a market that's oversaturated? You need to reposition where you're at. And again, as a quick gut check I use on market to really see if you're in the right place, I do what I call one chart business testing. So when Bezos was raising money for Amazon, he was able to do it with one chart, and he would simply use that to explain the whole opportunity. And he basically showed, here's internet growth now, here's where it's going to be. And it is just a crazy exponential chart. And he's like, people will be buying online and we want to own that. That simple chart allowed him to raise money and then set the foundation for what has become Amazon today. So ask yourself, what's that one chart that really demonstrates that you're in the right market? If you don't have it, can you start to seek it out and make some optimizations to ride the right wave? Okay, so you're at the foundational layer, you chose the right market, now you make sure you have the right product to serve that market. What does a 7-figure founder ask? They simply ask themselves, hey, can I just sell more of this product? Maybe they're not being thoughtful in the right question, and that is this. And it's what the 8-figure founder asks. What product is worth selling at scale? Scale is the key word there, and we'll talk about why. So when you're designing a product that can really get you to 8 figures, you need a couple core things. One, is it scalable? Meaning, can you fulfill on it where there isn't lots of incremental costs? Is it something that you can mass produce, something with a low return rate? You also want to have really high margin on this as much as possible. The reason for that is you need room for your contribution margin, meaning profit, to reinvest back into growth. And then this last one is key. Your product needs to be irresistible, something your market is dying to buy again and again. So these are some of the traits you want to look at, and kind of 4 steps to creating this scalable product, which is probably the most important of those. Is first, are you selling a painkiller? Is it a vitamin, a nice to have, or is it a must have? These are the ones that really allow you to scale. Second is this idea of delivery leverage. Can it be delivered with low marginal costs? For example, if we're selling t-shirts, we can do that. But if we're doing custom furniture, that's going to be a little bit harder. Another one is market alignment. What does that mean? It simply means, how are you selling this to the market, and does it align with how they buy? An issue of where this goes wrong, people will try and sell a subscription product when people don't want to be forced into a subscription. Instead, you could be selling bundles or bulk buying as opposed to subscription. And then finally, is there expansion potential? Meaning, if you have an entry point product, could you land and expand? In the fashion, you could lead with jeans and then you're selling with shirts. In the supplement space, you could lead with an M and then you're expanding with peptides and protein powders. And all of this creates product momentum, which allow you to really scale. So you might be looking at your product and you're like, oh man, I don't have some of these core things to make it a scalable, irresistible product. So let's talk about the leverage points that exist within product and the tweaks you could make, right? So one of them could be around a digital layer to a physical product, right? Instead of selling a product, you could be selling a system where instead of just selling workout equipment, it's workout equipment plus the 12-week training program to get sixes, a six-pack or something like that. Another thing is maybe you're doing some custom delivery with your product. How can you automate that or delegate that away? One big unlock we see is going from a one-time purchase to really pushing for bundles, upsells, and even subscriptions. For us and our t-shirt brand Neat, they were initially just selling one-off shirts at $38. We raised the price and only sold bundles. That allowed us to get our average order value from under 50 to over $120. And then finally, this one's big. What are your margins? A lot of times I see people at weak margins, they're breaking even. What can you do to enhance the product to command better pricing power to raise margins? This is one of the biggest issues I see when people hit mid seven figures and they plateau, is that they don't have the margins to reinvest in growth. So those are things to think through, especially before you start to scale. Which of those levers can you pull to really have a scalable product? And one of my favorite examples of this is Jolie. This is a filtered shower head, and for them, they sell a hardware product, and usually that's an acquisition-based business model where you always have to fill the funnel to get more people to buy the shower head. But what makes theirs really impressive is the subscription to the filters that you have to use it. This allowed them to go from idea to $50 million a year in sales in under 5 years, all on the back of a subscription tied to the hardware product. Another example, Dollar Shave Club. They didn't compete just on razor quality. They built a subscription model into their offer with, $1 razors. This allowed them to really train their audience on their value prop and condition them for repeat purchases. The question asked is, what's that change or tweak you can make to ensure your product meets your market where they are at? If you can add a subscription or a consumable element, do it. Anything that creates a reason for people to come back and that can really have a positive impact on your lifetime value. If you can make bundles by default, that can be a huge unlock that worked for us. And if your margins are thin, that needs to be fixed before you start pouring money into ads or optimizing the website, because every sale must help buy more inventory for the next sale. If not, it doesn't matter how good your ads are. Okay, we've nailed the foundational layer. You've chosen the right market. You have the right product that you can scale within that market. Now let's talk about the monetization layer. Do you understand how money flows through your business to fund growth? That's what we're going to get into. And so the 7-figure founder, what they ask is pretty simple. Hey, how do I make more sales? The 8-figure founder asks something different. They ask, how do I engineer a cash conversion cycle that prints money? In other ways, how can you quickly have cash flow through your business to fund growth? Because here's what's going to happen as you start to grow and scale. It's really a question of how much growth can you afford? And some factors that go into that is your payback time. How much does it cost to acquire a new customer and how long to get that money back? Also, what's your lifetime value? Do you get one transaction from a customer and that's it? Or do they come back again and again? And this is a big one, is contribution margin. What % of each sale can fund growth? Because I'll see clients and brands get sales, but then they don't have enough to reinvest back into growth or to inventory. And so one of your biggest leverage points with money is how can you shorten your customer acquisition costs, increase lifetime value so you can invest in growth. And so here's a diagram on the cash flywheel on how you can really think about money going through your business. First, how do you get money up front? Whether people are doing bundles, doing annual subscriptions on products. And also, what's your customer acquisition payback cycle? Can you get your CAC down because you have a non-paid channel working for you, or people pay up front immediately? Also, stacking transactions to increase your lifetime value is huge. And we have lots of companies where they'll get a first transaction and then they're going for that second one in the welcome series or on the confirmation page to really stack transactions to increase LTV. The other thing is you're gonna have natural constraints, whether that is inventory, accounts payable, accounts receivable. How can you remove those constraints? Getting good terms with your fulfillment partners and getting money upfront through pre-orders or wait lists. And that can really help you fund growth internally. So you might be looking at this like, oh man, we've got some roadblocks ahead of us. So let's talk about the leverage points that live within your cash flow and what you could do. So if you have a slow payback period, how can you use bundles or upfront offers to help with that? If you have a low lifetime value, what are the things you can do for continuity offers or upsells to really help customers see the value of being with you for long term? If you have cash flow gaps, we have that with our t-shirt brand. It's really thinking through, can we sell pre-orders to fund that next round of inventory? If you have a low margin product, we'll talk about value ladders you can do to help increase your overall value. The other thing is the brand that gets paid back the fastest can outspend everyone else and still stay profitable. One of my favorite examples of this is Chewy. This is an e-commerce brand that really has owned the market for dog and cat food. So they built the whole business around getting customers to basically get on auto ship for dog and cat food. That way they get the reoccurring orders going. Once they got this going, their repeat purchase rate skyrocketed to over 80%, meaning 8 out of 10 customers would come back again and again to buy dog food or cat food. So when you have that kind of retention built in, you can afford to spend aggressively to acquire customers at whatever cost, because they're going to come back again and again, and you're going to have a great lifetime value. The big shift we made with Neat was around bundles, and I'll showcase what we did. And we did that with what I call the offer layers. And so there's 5 core layers to this. So when you're building out your cash money model, you need to ask yourself, okay, what's our activation offer? What's the thing that can get people in the door the fastest? You're then going to have your core offer of the main purchase that is like your flagship offering. But what about those people that love your product, love your brand? You have the expansion offer, where if they love that, you can capture more money, add more value with new categories and product lines. The other thing is you're going to have people that aren't ready to do that core offer. So you need to be able to downsell into a rescue offer. These are things that salvage any drop-offs to re-engage and really stop the money leaking through your business. And then finally, can you create that recurring offer so you can have predictable revenue that compounds? So to show this in action, let me show you what we did with Neat right here. So the activation offer is very simple. We'll do a $44 shirt at 10% off. We're even testing a $44 shirt with a free shirt with your first time purchase. That's working extremely well. But the core offer is the Urban Survival Sweat Set, which is our bundle at $127. This is what we're going for. And if people like that, we can then sell them other bundles and other packages. The Henley pack, the Work Week pack, the travel pack. We also have rescue offers where it's a last chance discount for first time buyers, which goes to 15%, which is the second biggest discount we'll do all year. And then finally, for people that you know will come back again and again, you can have the recurring offer. So for us, it's getting them into the loyalty program to give them early access to products. This setup allowed us to triple sales basically on day one with this brand, and allowed us to set the foundation to have cash flow through the business to fund growth and 10x our ad spend. As we move through the pyramid, we're within the monetization layer, and we talked about money, and connected to that is positioning. Because to be able to command pricing power, it's all about your positioning in your brand. And so the 7-figure founder, what do they ask at this level? They're looking at their brand and they're simply saying, how do I elevate it? How do I make it look more professional? The 8-figure founder asks something completely different. They ask, how do I become unforgettable, uncopyable, and desired? In order to do that, it's really about a very simple idea. You don't want to be seen, you want to be remembered. There's so many options out there, lots of competitors, lots of noise, lots of distractions. How do you become remembered? And so to do this, you need to think through a few things. First, don't be better, be different. You need to be irresistible, and you need to be something that is hard to copy so people can't come in and make the same claim. And then finally, can you be memorable? So if the key thing is to be memorable, let's give you 5 memory structures that you could use to make your brand memorable. One way to do that is with signature language. This is repeatable language that you own, especially if you're doing category creation. A great example of this is Spanx with the idea of shapewear. They would have come to market being like, oh, we have pantyhose, we cut the feet off to make you look good under a dress. That'd be a little confusing. But as they start to talk about shapewear and owning a category, they become a market of one. Another example is a memorable metaphor. This is a visual shortcut to make it more visual so you can understand it. With AG1, with Athletic Greens, as opposed to talking about all the benefits of the product, they went very simple, saying your daily health drink to train you on how to use it and give you the benefits of it. The third way to be memorable is recurring characters or symbols, right? That could be a mascot, that could be a logo. Vuori did this really well with their subtle tags. That way their shirts become mini billboards for people in that category. Another one is origin story. People love narratives. A great example of this is Tom's shoes and the shoe drop that reinforces their value statement of for every pair you buy, they give a pair to someone in need. And then finally, it's really about your unique view. Where can you zag against the norm? A contrarian belief. Untuck It has done this really well with their actual name of the shirt going against traditional button downs that you tuck in. So as we think through building a memorable brand that you do not forget, there's a few power plays we like to deploy to make sure you are not forgotten. And I want to go through a couple of those as we kind of get into it. So one power play you can do is your form factor, really changing the composition of the product and zagging against the norm, right? That way you stand out, especially if you look at it on a shelf and it's really different. A great example of that is Commentier frozen coffee pods. Coffee is naturally dripped hot. They're freezing it, saying it's even better, easier to get going with your day. That gets your attention and makes them a market of one in a crowded category. Another power play that I love is extreme demonstration. Anytime you can let the product speak for itself, showing before and afters, that's the best. We did that with our brand Neat Apparel with the water balloon test, where we pop a water balloon under the shirt and show how the water doesn't soak through on ours like it does with regular t-shirts. This has been the catalyst for some of our top performing ads. Another positioning power play, and instead of selling a product like your competitors, can you sell a system? Proactive did this extremely well by not just saying, hey, here's acne face cream. They said, here's our 3-step acne system to rid you of acne in under 12 weeks. I'm a huge fan of niching down and owning a category. The Missouri Star Quilting Company did this by really just owning the quilting category and becoming the Amazon or the go-to source of it. Another great example of a power play you could deploy is the idea of challenger energy. Can you go after an incumbent or a category and really make some headlines because you're going against the grain? You ideally want to do this when that category or incumbent has a low NPS net promoter score. A great example is Oatly going aggressively after the dairy industry and creating their own space in the supermarkets. Another great one is irresistible offer as your brand power play, where your offer is your positioning. The obvious example here is Dollar Shave Club going to market with dollar razors. You also have JSX for private flights at $149. Another classic example that you see people do is extreme personality. Liquid Death and Red Bull do this phenomenally well, where their personality is the point of differentiation. Another one is this idea of cult, not category, where your product is almost an identity with someone. Yeti is a great example. When you have that Yeti logo, there's a certain persona you live with that logo. Same with 10,000, the shorts company for CrossFit athletes. Their logo is almost an identifier of that person's persona. So those are things to consider when trying to make a brand that has positioning that can give you pricing power or help you stand out. That is key before we go to the next level of scaling, which is the acquisition layer. Now, to know if you have positioning, the test is very simple. When someone lands on your site for the first time, do they think it was made for them specifically? Or do they think it looks like every other store they visited? If it's the latter, that's your biggest constraint right now. It's not your creative, it's not your targeting, it's not your offer, it's your positioning. And too many brands gloss over this and try and get into the tactics when they're missing the most important thing and they need to do brand optimization. Okay, now that the monetization layer is in place, you understand how cash flows through your business and you have your positioning dialed in. Now we can think about the acquisition layer. And what that means is building the engine to acquire new customers at scale. And let's first start with reach, with getting in front of the right audience. So let's talk about what the 7-figure asks. They're simply saying, how do I get more sales right now? While the 8-figure founder asks something different. They're simply saying, how do I build a traffic system that can scale and compound over time? That way we're not just throwing money at ads, and when we stop throwing money at ads, our traffic stops. So when doing this, we're thinking through a compounding system, right? Do you have an audience arbitrage advantage to acquire people? Have you scheduled your growth based on the peaks and troughs of your seasonality and engineered these marketing moments? And then finally, are you investing in that top of the funnel? That way down the road, you will pay those dividends. And if you do those 3 things, you're going to have what we call kind of audience leverage. But let me get into the foundational components of tackling this if you're trying to build an 8-figure brand. There are 3 ways to get customers. You can buy them, you can build an audience, or you can borrow someone else's audience. And what do the brands do that hit 8 figures? They sequence these 3 things correctly and understand the payback profile of each of these 3 tactics. Now let's start with the buy tactic, because this one gives you the fastest feedback loop. For D2C e-commerce brands, Facebook and Instagram are still the primary engine to grow and scale before you diversify. So once Meta is working, you're then layering on Google Shopping and search, because people see your social ad, they get curious, and then they search for it later. And those high intent searches are where you can capture them with intent ads like Google. Beyond these 2, as you start to spend over 25, 50, 100,000 per month, then you're starting to diversify into something like TikTok Shops to go after the right audience that can make sense for you, or maybe it's Pinterest, it could be Apple Oven. But candidly, if you cannot scale on Meta or Google, you're not going to be able to scale on these. Now, True Classic scaled to 90 million in 2 years, almost entirely on Meta. But the key wasn't that they just did paid, it's that they did content that compounds. They did comedy style creative that was so entertaining, people shared it. It worked for paid, it worked for organic, it worked for social. That drove their CPMs, cost per impressions, down, generated these organic referrals that really helped pick up the volume. So the goal with paid isn't just to hit ROAS targets or CAC goals, it's making creative good enough that it generates word of mouth, because then your effective cost to acquire a customer drops without you spending any extra dollars. Okay, let's go to the next one, which is building your own audience, because this is the channel that really compounds. However, it's painful because it takes the longest and you have to be the most patient, and you have to have the stomach to invest in it, knowing you're not going to see dividends till down the road. So that could mean your email and SMS list, which will become your most valuable asset that your brand owns. No algorithm can take that away from you. Every visitor who comes to your site and leaves without buying is a missed opportunity. And if you can pull them in so you can retarget them with pop-up, with a quiz, or some sort of lead magnet, you're potentially maximizing the hard work you did to get them to the website. Beyond email, most e-commerce brands are completely ignoring technical SEO, building community. That's a huge missed opportunity. So when you're building out collection pages, you want to make sure those are optimized for AI-based search and SEO. That means having good headlines, having faceted navigation, having FAQs at the bottom of this, so these pages start to compound and work for you. The other aspect of building could be a community. For example, Gymshark built a huge fitness community before most people even thought about buying the clothing. Again, this is hard, it takes time, but if you do it, it gives you a huge unfair advantage. Now let's go to the third one that a lot of time is overlooked, and that's borrowing an audience. And this is about multiplying your reach by tapping into other people's audiences. So there's a couple ways to do this, right? So first, you have micro influencers with between 10,000 to 100,000 followers in your niche who actually use the product, and these candidly tend to outperform some of the bigger influencers that have a mass audience. But obviously you have to string together a bunch of micro influencers to pull this off the right way. Affiliate programs. This allows you to turn your best customers and creators into your sales team, into marketers, where they will create assets for you, blast it. TikTok's been really good for this. And then you're giving them a percentage back of the sale that they helped pull off. So for example, Jolie, they grew substantially with influencers seeding the shower filter because it was visually interesting. They're talking about it. And that allowed them to kind of create this movement and this thunderclap where other people are talking about their brand. When you buy, build, and borrow, when you have them start working together, the whole system compounds. That way you're not doing this in a silo, but you're having them connected, right? So paid traffic drives email capture that turns traffic into an owned audience. And then a great product experience creates word of mouth, where influencers can then amplify it and SEO catches those long tail searches. You see how this compounds. That's traffic that creates more traffic. And it's how you go from writing a check to Meta every single month to building a system that can grow no matter how the algorithm changes or how these channels can fluctuate on performance. One more thing worth mentioning here is to schedule your growth intentionally. The brands that constantly blow me away are the ones that aren't just running ads and that's it. They're engineering marketing moments throughout the year on top of a baseline. So for example, you might have two natural peaks. Maybe it's Q4 and Q2. But what about Q1 and Q3 when there's a trough? They are engineering moments every 2 to 3 weeks to give you a reason to care about the brand. So that means you're doing product launches, partnerships, collaborations, seasonal campaigns. You're picking a fight. You're doing things to make noise. There's a reason why Amazon invented Prime Day in July, specifically to create a peak during an otherwise very slow period. So what's your Prime Day? That's a manufactured marketing moment, and you can do the exact same thing. So look at your 12 calendars, look at your historical data, and ask yourself how many marketing moments you actually have planned, and whether you're doing anything in those slow months to create demand, or if you're just waiting to capture it. To get to 8 figures is the one that can really orchestrate a calendar where you're always maximizing demand. Another great example of building an audience is what Jolie did. They sell shower heads with filtration system. If they would have gone to market like, hey, buy our shower heads, have purified water, it might have been okay. But instead, they went to market with a free tool, simply asking, do you know what chemicals are in your water? Enter your email, enter your zip code, and we'll tell you. And so this product added value and it brought awareness to the problem that they solve. This funnel of building the audience based on adding value is what allowed them to scale to 50 million in 5 years by building an audience on the back of paid ads. You focused on getting in front of the right audience. Now we've got to do the final mile of getting them to convert. I'm kind of blown away where people will over-index on ads, but then they'll underspend on getting them to convert. And that's the other piece of scaling to 8 figures. The 7-figure founder, when it comes to conversion, they're simply asking, why aren't more people buying? Like, what's wrong with my website? The 8-figure founder asks something different. How do we remove objections before they show up? You know the points of friction that are coming with your product or your category or offer. It could be confusion, it could be price, it could be quality, it could be use case. How do you get ahead of those known objections? The other big call out is the reason why I love conversion is that it naturally compounds. You fix an issue with your website, you make a killer offer, you reap the benefits of that every day from then on. But in order to do that, there's a couple core things you need to do. First, you need to understand how do you speak to this customer before you even try and convert them. The second thing is with your customers, what are the known objections you have? And then here's the final one that most people forget. How do you activate them right now? Are you creating urgency? Do you have an irresistible offer where people want to buy from you? The worst thing that can happen is people come to your website like, oh, cool product, cool brand, maybe I'll buy it later, because you didn't give them that reason to buy now. So let's start with the first one, how you speak to your customer. Let's talk about your customer in 3 personas. You have the informed buyer, the frustrated buyer, and the oblivious. The informed buyer, those are your early adopters where they're looking at you and other competitors, they're doing comparison shopping. And how you speak to them is super simple. It's features. Because they're already nerding out on it, you can nerd out with them on what you offer. So let's go to the frustrated founder. They aren't informed, but they have a problem and they're looking for a solution. So how do we speak to them? Super simple. We don't talk about our solution. We talk about the problem. We agitate it. We speak to the problem better than anybody else. And then we are perceived as the best solution. And you all are probably already really good at that. The hardest audience to crack is the third one, the oblivious buyer. They're not informed. They have a problem, but they don't know it. They're oblivious. So we have to give them a reason to care. So how do you speak to them? Super simple. We just have to get their attention. And so that could be lots of different ways. That could be fear mongering, scaring them. That could be being funny. That could be stats. That could be with infotainment. It could be puppies. It could be kittens. But you have to give them a reason to care. If you can crack the code on speaking to these 3 personas, you're going to be able to make ads in a website that can convert at scale. Okay, so now that we know how to speak to them, or we're thinking through that, we need to start to get ahead of these known objections that are going to come with our product. And I kind of call them the 7 silent killers of conversion. And here are the 7 that usually are blocking you from scaling. It could be price, where people think you're too expensive. It could be quality. They have doubts on if you'll actually work, so there's some trust there. It could be confusion. Messaging isn't clear for them and they feel overwhelmed, they bounce. It could be urgency. We're like, oh, this is cool, but not now. It could be competition. They're doing comparison shopping and it's a race to the bottom with price. It could be the actual product, not sure if it's right for them. And then finally, it could be value. Like, it looks cool, I think it'll work, but I'm not going to get value out of that. And there's ways to overcome all of them. But the first is to understand what makes sense for you. So with value, it could be around changing the perceived price, like the cost per day, or having testimonial social proof showcasing all the utility of a shirt. So it really maximizes the value of it. If it's confusion, you can really call out who it's for, who it's not for, have good FAQs. And if it's competition, having comparison tables to really anchor against others from your lens of why they like it and why they don't like it. So I want to show you a fun example of a company that once they unblocked conversion, allowed them to scale from low 7 figures to mid 8 figures. So this company has a travel pillow and this is their website, beautiful website, but it wasn't converting. And again, we could just throw spaghetti at the wall with assumptions on how we fix it, but we spoke to the customers. We started to understand what wasn't working. And here's the number one objection: skepticism. Like, I don't think it's going to work. I'm not going to pay double for a travel pillow that I would get at the airport bookstore. So with that objection in mind, we went after it. And if it's skepticism that it won't work, we talked about the 10,000 5-star reviews. We hit on the use case of never slept better on a red eye, turn your middle seat into first class. And this started to get the conversion rate to come up. Also, there was confusion on how it worked. So notice how we showcase the images of how someone puts it around their neck. But the other unlock was the fact that people started to buy not single products, but in pairs and bundles. So we defaulted to the bundle. Not only did we lift the conversion rate, we lift the average order value. This was transformative because it allowed them to be first purchase profitable with a strong contribution margin. If we go back to the money section, where they could reinvest in growth. This took them from 7 figures to 8 figures, expanded to 5 different international audiences, all because they were laser focused on removing friction. So we talked about how to speak to customers, how to get ahead of those points of friction. Now here's the missing piece. Do you know how to activate a customer? Essentially, how do you create an offer that makes them feel dumb saying no? And there's a lot of great formulas out there for offers. One of my favorite ones is this one from $100 Million Offer, where it talks about 2 things you want to be really high: your dream outcome and the likelihood of achievement. And then what you want to be low is time delay to satisfaction or gratification, and then the effort or sacrifice they need to put into this. There's a reason why, 7-minute abs is a thing, right? It's because time delay to satisfaction, effort, sacrifice was very minimal. So ask yourself, of those 4 core components, where could you really stand out? A great one here is Curology. Their offer was amazing. They gave you the product for free, just pay shipping. You get to text with a dermatologist rather than have to go into the office, and no appointment needed. They're creating this no-brainer offer, removing all friction, and this is how they scaled to a brand over $100 million. Was all on the back of this offer. So the last thing to really understand about conversion is that it's not some one-time page redesign. It's also an ongoing testing system. You're not going to knock this out of the park at the first go. It's about creating that muscle of constantly getting the feedback from customers and then constantly understanding their objections and then testing into ways to remove it. The brands at 8 figures are running conversion tests every single week, reading customer reviews. They're updating the page continuously. If you fix something once and never come back to it, you'll eventually hit another ceiling with a different audience segment and not understand why the numbers are changing. Now you've done the hard work of those first 6 leverage points. You found the right market, the right product to serve it. You've nailed your money model and how cash flows through the business. Your positioning is memorable and you stand out against competitors. You've got a traffic system that compounds and builds upon itself. You have conversion that holds up as you scale with these different audiences to remove any points of friction. Now this is where it all starts to pay off. Expansion, this is the key to leverage, right? Figure out what is the right leverage to go after, right? like team leverage, money leverage, system leverage. This way, you're not working harder. You're taking a proven playbook and applying it to new channels, new markets, and new distribution. So channel expansion is usually one of the first moves. Your D2C site is working, so the next step could be expansion into Amazon, where over 60% of product searches really start. And if you're not there, you're leaving real demand uncaptured from people who are already looking for what you sell. Once Amazon is working, you can explore wholesale and retail partnerships. Now, these become multipliers once your brand has proven the D2C model, but they're very hard to build without that proof first. Liquid Death proved the model of D2C, then ended up in every gas station and grocery store in the country. True Classic scaled D2C first, and then they expanded to other channels after they had a position of strength. So the orders of these things really matter. Geographic expansion is another major lever if your distribution is set up. Once your US playbook is dialed in, you can scale that to other English-speaking markets like the UK, Canada, Australia, Ireland. Getting those right before taking on the complexity of different languages and currencies is a really smart move. For instance, we did this with Troll Travel Pillow. This is how they were able to go from 8 figures. We took the same playbook in the US and applied it to 6 different markets. Same thing with Neat. We're now in 4 different international markets, same playbook, all on the back of geographic, the channel leverage. You can also go where you translate the site, run the same ads, website, email, and you translate that. It's a little bit more work, but it can still pay off. That's the whole point of expanding. You're not guessing, you're not starting from scratch. You have this unfair head start. So internal leverage is the other half of expansion that people also overlook. And there are kind of 3 paths to it. System leverage is about documenting what's working well enough so this runs without you, right? We're talking about SOPs, running EOS, doing AI-enabled workflows with Claude Cowork and all the connectors and MCPs you can. And then team leverage kind of stacks on top of that, whether they're teams that are using AI to scale. But here's the big call out. When you're delegating to people, do not delegate tasks. You need to delegate outcomes. So people own the solution, and it's just not a bunch of people that are constantly hounding you with what to do. When you give someone ownership of a business result rather than just a simple to-do list, you're giving completely different level of initiation and accountability. Asset leverage is about looking at what you already have and putting that to work. So a piece of content that performed well in one channel that can work across others. And the customer data that you've been sitting on might open up targeting advantages you haven't even explored yet. But the final shift of this stage is moving from founder mode to systems and culture. In the early days, the business only grows when you push, right? And it slows when you stop. At 8 figures, the business grows because of the system you've built, not because you're in every single decision approving things. And honestly, you can see the difference this makes just by the people running these businesses. If 2 founders walk in the room, one's a 7-figure founder, one's an 8-figure founder, I can tell right away who's who. The one that's more relaxed, smiling, has time to be present, that's 8 figures. The one who's stressed on their phone, putting out fires, that's a 7-figure founder. And that simple reason, that's the 8-figure founder building a system that didn't require them to be in every single decision. And that's the ultimate form of leverage that allows you to have space and allows you to scale. All right, so that was a lot, but now here's what I want you to do. I want you to take 2 minutes and I want you to grade yourself A to F, like we're back in grade school, on these 7 core categories. Your lowest score is almost always your biggest constraint that if you unlock that could allow you to go to that next level. And after that, you have 2 simple options. You can take what you learned in this video and go try and do it on your own in between the fires that you're putting out, or you can jump on a free strategy call with the same team that's helped dozens of e-commerce brands work through these exact leverage points, these exact same constraints, these problems, and break through to scale to 8 figures. So on that call, we'll go through your specific numbers. We'll identify which levers are holding you back and build out a full roadmap so you know exactly where to focus and in what order. That way we're optimized for speed and most importantly, not burning money. You'll be able to book this free strategy call with us just by going down to the description below and clicking the link. So the worst case is you walk away with clarity on where your brand actually stands and what you need to be focused on if you're going to actually hit 8 figures. So click the first link in the description to book a call. And thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.